Just gonna check my stream real quick and see how my audio matches up to my microphone matches up to my desktop audio before I get started. Sounds to me like the desktop audio is a little too high, so I'm gonna turn it down real quick before I get started. See how that works. Oh, I don't remember what the latency is on this, but I think it's like 10 seconds. That sounds better. And for any of you who have watched any of my Inwin 301 videos reviewing the case and noise and thermals and stuff like that, you can see the thermals up on the screen. Of course, I'm not doing a whole lot, but you can see them there, and you can hear the microphone, of course, is even further from me than it is the PC. So you'll be able to hear it's not super loud for anybody who's has seen those videos and wanted to see it in real time. Actually, I'll do you one better. I'll pause my audio real quick. So right now you can hear the case fans got a little bit loud, but they will turn down in just a moment. Let me actually do a screen capture to show you guys how I go about this. Because one thing I don't want is to be overworking my PC, degrading it, or you know, making it any hotter than it needs to be. So I'm going to switch from my UE4 to my display capture. So there I am. So let me put this away real quick. I'm going to open Cinebench and I'm going to run it real quick. And then I'm going to change my voltage. So I'll open Ryzen Master so you can see what's going on with it. You can see it's running a little over 1.4 volts, and it's really only doing a maximum. This is, if I remember correctly, this is actually a value for a single core max frequency. So even if it's not using, like here you can see it's only doing less than 20% CPU utilization, but here it's showing that it's pretty close to, or at least near the peak frequency. So that's really telling you the highest value for any of the cores, as opposed to individually, which of course you can change that by going to advanced view if you have this version of Ryzen Master, this user interface. So anyway, I'll run it, and of course it's going to be lower than sort of a previous score because I'm running Unreal Engine, and I've also got Chrome running in the background, and I even have this desktop overlay, which uses a little bit, not a whole lot, but Unreal Engine is going to be the real strain here. So this test will produce a lower score, but let's just see how it goes. It's getting pretty noisy at this point. .37 volts, 74 degrees so far. I anticipate that going up. It's almost done. This does feel significantly slower, of course, with Unreal Engine open, and I imagine the score is going to be gross. Yeah, 2913, because Unreal Engine is using quite a lot of my CPU. But what I wanted to showcase was the temperature, and as you saw, it's hitting about 4172 megahertz for the CPU. So I just set my manual to about that, 4175, and instead of letting it run that super high voltage, all I did was change the voltage to 1.18125. This is a, as you can see here, a Ryzen 5 3600X. And so I'll hit apply because I already know this works. I would suggest testing it on your own by gradually decreasing this value until it crashes and then bringing it back up. Alright, so now that I've applied that, you'll see it kind of stays at that max unless it's doing almost nothing, which is not going to be the case with Unreal Engine open. But let's see if my score gets any worse and if my temperature changes. I actually haven't done this with Unreal Engine open. I've only done it with nothing running in the background. So who knows, maybe the score will get worse and I'll increase the voltage. But so far when I do it standalone, when I'm only running Cinebench and Ryzen Master, I get the same score whether with the default or with these two settings. So one thing right off the bat, the CPU clock speed, as opposed to being close to 4175, it's actually running to 4175. And that's why Cinebench is not necessarily the only thing you should base your stability on. Because it doesn't, even if you set it to auto, the default is actually a maximum of 4400 megahertz. And you see Cinebench really only runs it up to 4170 something. And you can find like the minimum to run Cinebench, but then you go try to do something else and you'll find out it'll crash. So it's not, it is a good baseline to start with, and then use your various apps that use a lot of CPU power, and if it crashes, raise it up by a click or two, and then if it doesn't, then move on to another program. Open another one that you know is pretty heavy, and see if it crashes, and if it doesn't crash, then move on to another one, and just kind of continue to do this until you find that none of your apps, none of your programs will crash at your desired voltage. And of course, if you run this voltage too low and it still doesn't crash Cinebench, well, what will happen is you'll actually get a worse score. And that's why if I get a worse score right now, then I know that while running something in the background and then trying to use the remaining amount of my CPU, that 29 change. So not really any worse. So that tells me that this is fine. Yeah, and as you saw, the temperature barely went only a little bit over 60 degrees, 61, 62 degrees Celsius, which is a pretty big improvement from 74. And this is the Wraith Prism, not the Wraith Spire that came with it. And when I was running the Spire and I'd let it run at auto, when it would do the same clock speed, because the CPU wasn't any different. The only thing that was different was the cooler, and it would go all the way up to like 80 degrees Celsius, which is a little too hot for me. It's not ideal, and that's considering like I don't keep it blazing hot in here. I'm in a beautiful California winter right now. It's like 65 degrees outside or something like that, Fahrenheit. But I usually keep it something like 25 degrees Celsius or like 77 or so degrees Fahrenheit in my apartment. So yeah, so this is the first thing I'm going to do, is just set my voltage. I have not found the proper setting to change in the BIOS that gives me this same result, that gives me the same Cinebench score, which is usually around 3700 and change, and the same temperature, which is 62 or so, depending on what the temperature is in here. Sometimes it's a little bit lower. But yeah, I haven't found a BIOS setting that does that. I have changed a few settings, and I'll tell you, I would not recommend offset mode necessarily, because I know a lot of people recommend using offset mode. There are some problems with that. The problem with it is that, and let me go to my Radeon software to show you how this sort of works, is that there will be different phases for given frequencies and their respective voltages. Okay, and this is what I set mine to, just to help it run a little bit cooler. And there really are diminishing returns beyond just about this frequency. I would say maybe even 2000. You could bump it all the way up to 2000 megahertz. The base, like the factory, is like 2079 or something, and up there it's just significantly hotter, a little less stable, and not really much gains in performance. So I just kind of set it to this value, knowing that I might lose 1 or 2 FPS in a 60 FPS game, but you know, it's I'm not going to run into stability issues or temperature issues, so I just run it this way. But as you can see, there are different phases and different voltages for those respective phases. So what can happen is, even though at the maximum, that voltage that you set, the maximum voltage that you set would work, if you're doing an offset, that means that, let's say I was reducing it by 100 millivolts. So I'd reduce this by 100 to 1049, and I'd reduce this by 100 to 696, and I'd reduce this to 100 by 100 to 650. And the problem is, even if that works at the maximum, those reduced voltage offsets may not be enough for the other phases. And I would say Ryzen is pretty conservative, or AMD is rather conservative in that respect, that even when your CPU is barely doing anything at all, it still will run up to whatever like the max voltage setting is, which is why oh, I just got a text. I don't remember what I was saying. Yeah, that even when I was only using, you know, about 20% or less of my CPU, it was still running at about 1.4 volts. So there's not a ton of trouble with that, but it is just something to be aware of, that you could find out that setting your voltage to a max of 1.25 works, and then you try to use an offset to sort of find that same value, or you're just changing the offset and running Cinebench only, and it goes from almost no utilization to max utilization, and then you open something else and start using your computer as you normally do, which is not just running Cinebench, and then it'll crash, and it could be because of those voltage values for the other phases being, and this is a GPU that I'm showing you right now. This is the 5700 XT interface. So this isn't the CPU. These aren't the CPU settings, but it works in very much the same way, that it will change voltage depending on what the frequency is. So it's just something to be aware of. And if it does crash that way, then I would recommend setting it through Ryzen Master, or just increasing or decreasing the amount of offset that you're using. So that's kind of the first thing I like to do, because I haven't found a BIOS setting for it. It's not really too much trouble that when I turn on my computer, I open my Ryzen Master, and I hit apply, because it saves these settings. The ones that I set here, it saves it, so I just have to hit apply, and then I close it, and then I know it's going to be stable and it's going to run right, and it's not going to get too hot. So now let's get back into Unreal Engine. Actually, let me switch this back from screen capture. Okay, come on. don't know why this is not working. And I do have this window open. I don't know why it's not showing it. Yeah, I really don't know what's going on there. I mean, I can just remove this one and then I can do it again. Hopefully it'll let me. Display capture? No. Window capture. It's fine. Let's name this one UE4. I don't know why it's not showing it. Let me close the Unreal Engine and then open it back up. Here it is. Alright, it is showing this window over it, so I'll switch to this setting. It's not the right size. Let's transform this to fit screen. Alright. And of course, I don't want this over my camera. So there's my camera. Alright, now that I've been going on for 20 minutes doing absolutely nothing except messing with Ryzen Master and running Cinebench, let's get started. Okay. So, I chose a third person when I started this project, and if I were to hit new project, you'd see as soon as you open the project, it asks you for your project settings, like what platforms you're going to put this on. Is it going to be PC? Is it going to be mobile? I just left it as defaults, which is PC, and it's pretty much everything. And I enabled ray tracing, because you have the option to allow for ray tracing or not allow for ray tracing. Of course, this changes the size of the game, but it doesn't change anything that you really do in the development. That's ray tracing is sort of taken care of aside of, because you can do reflection captures and things like that, but if you're running ray tracing, it kind of does it all in real time. And so to give you an idea of that, so here is my character, right? And you can see his reflection. So this is when the sun is shining down. This is all sort of baked lighting that it does. What it does is it sort of does pre-rendering ray tracing. Before it runs the game, it'll sort of do a ray trace. And it seems like that may or may not be the case in for this particular light at the moment, light source. Yeah, and I don't remember which setting this is exactly, but Unreal Sensei has a really, really good tutorial about this. And mentions that if the object or if the light is dynamic, not movable, as stated over here. So this allows for partially baked lighting, while movable, of course, does not. And it's totally dynamic, so the shadows are not they are dynamic in that, like, if my character moves, the shadow moves along. He's casting shadow the entire time that he's moving. But the light itself, because if it's set to movable, you can see here that there's not as much what would you call this, diffusion of the light as it sort of curves around him, or as it sort of hits and casts a shadow that's a little softened around the edges, and you might be able to see it here a little bit, because real light doesn't behave this way. This just has some settings for fall off, if you want this to be a gradual or a sharp transition, and so you can sort of change that blending effect, but it's still not doing any dynamic ray tracing, where it's not taking into account, like, if this wall were red, for example, that the light would be hitting it and that red light would be bouncing back into this one and casting a red light along the floor as well. So if in movable, it doesn't allow for that. And let's see the difference between static. Static light can't be changed in game. Fully baked lighting, fastest rendering. So this would be something like sunlight, and then a stationary light will have its shadowing and bounce lighting static, from static geometry baked. So it'll create baked lighting for anything that is static or stationary. So for these things, but not for the character that's going to be moving. All other lighting will be dynamic. It can change color and intensity in game, but it can't move. Allows for partially baked lighting, dynamic shadows for movable objects. So you can change color and intensity, and will cast basically ray traced lighting and shadows for non-moving objects. So if you had a room, for example, with a light switch, and you turn that light switch on, and you set it to this setting, it would still cast ray traced shadows for the stationary objects in the room, but not for the player or any other movable object. Well, this one here, you couldn't change it in game. You couldn't turn it off, turn it on, or change the color of it. That's fine. I'm not going to mess with that for now. I'll leave it at stationary, and if I want to change the static later, I can. So this is one thing that you'll see a lot, is lighting needs to be rebuilt. Pretty much as soon as you move anything that has any sort of, would cast any sort of shadow or reflection, is that lighting needs to be rebuilt. So I have a few options. I can just hit build, and it'll build basically everything it needs to make sure that the scene is complete and everything's been accounted for, or I can go to build lighting only. In this case, I'm just going to hit build so you can see how long it takes. There, so that's how long it took. And of course, I actually am running OBS in the background, and I'm running it purely through CPU utilization as opposed to GPU. This is not an NVIDIA card, so I can't use the NVENC encoder, and I'd rather get a better idea of how hard this scene will be to render for my GPU, because that's sort of what it's going to be dependent upon. I'm not making or planning to make like a competitive FPS or anything like that, so I don't foresee it being like a CPU heavy game. It will likely be more limited to, I like it, I plan to make it maybe more visual, and thus a little heavier on the GPU to run at high resolution, or 4K 60 or 1440p 60, something like that, depending on your hardware. And so if I go to full screen, so in this keyboard, because it's a wireless keyboard and the keys are up here, these are like multifunction keys, I'm going to press F11. It's maybe not going to look like F11 because I have to hold function to hit F11, and that will enable full screen. So the resolution that you've set this window to, essentially, when you go to full screen, of course, it's the size of your entire screen. That will give you a better idea of how your hardware is going to handle this workload. And so there is still a little bit of work going on for my GPU for other stuff, even for Streamlabs, because it's running this, and I can change this to, oh, you can't even see it. I'll go to, put UE4 under display capture. All right, so here you can see it's also rendering this image. So even though it's streaming it and it's mostly CPU heavy for doing that, it is still rendering this, and as a result, it is using up my GPU a little bit. So I can change that. I can reduce this by going to performance mode. And now it doesn't show me the preview anymore. The issue with that, of course, is I can't see my preview if I want to. But what I do to get around this, because I'm streaming to YouTube, and you could do it streaming to Twitch also, and I do it to keep an eye out for any comments or anything like that, is I just leave it open on my phone. So here it is on my phone, so I can see if anybody comments or anything like that. And then I'll just place it in view and out of view of the camera. And now I can see if anybody comments, and I can keep an eye on my screen, my preview, in the event that, say, my camera turns off because I'm using the Canon webcam utility, and thus my DSLR will eventually die, and I'll have to swap out the battery. So actually, let me just go back to moving UE4 above display capture. All right, let me turn my music back on. I'm sure it's a little boring just listening to somebody talk without any entertainment in the background. So this is a 3600X, which is almost no difference from a 3600. I think there's like a 50 megahertz difference between the two, which realistically isn't even real, because you can set the 3600 to 4400 and it'll be just fine. Also, I think that the TDP, the thermal design power, for the 3600X is significantly more than the 3600, which I think is kind of weird. But it's probably just because to get those extra 50 megahertz that they wanted, like I tested Cinebench before, and to run it at 4175, I have to set it to 1.1825, and I know it's stable for basically all of my programs. I haven't found one that crashes it yet. And if I set it to 4250, for example, I have to set it like as high as 1.27. Which it's not, the frequency is not going up by a whole lot more, but the voltage is going up significantly more. So to get those extra 50 megahertz is probably what caused the TDP change to be so drastic. In any case, so here I am in my scene, and I can press G for game view, and that sort of shows me exactly what the player is going to be seeing when they're playing. You see, this shows me my gizmos, and I can choose it for my lighting or my sphere or really any of my objects. If I left click on something, it shows me a gizmo. This allows me to move it in this direction, or move it in the other direction. And maybe you can't see it too well right now, but there is a blue one pointing up, a green one pointing to the right, and a red one pointing sort of upward and to the right. So these are the X, Y, and Z axes. And you can see which one is changing when you move it. So let's say I moved it in this direction. And I can see that under location, that value is changing. And this one, Z is now changing under location. Now this one is going to be moving my Y value. So that can all be seen over here under details for the object that you're moving. This is different from world settings if you're going to be seeing. These are the settings for the world, what you can and can't do in developing this world. And then if you're in levels, you're going to see your different levels, not your different objects or actors. And so to go to see those, you go to World Outliner and you're going to click on whatever it is that, or you left click it and it'll highlight it for you. So if I click this, it's going to be linear stair static mesh. Okay. And if I click on the floor, now I'm looking at the floor. Likewise for clicking on any other object. And that will show you also its respective gizmo, this way of moving it. And so another thing about it, and I'll click on this one, so here for a little more contrast. Just because I don't see a whole lot of contrast over here, the cursor pretty much turns like almost the same shade of gray as the object. Actually, let me just apply a material to it. So here in the details for it, you're going to see that there is a material, and so this is the material for it. Cube material. Game, geometry, meshes, cube material. And so if you were to go over here and search through your content browser, that's kind of what you would see. Starter content, and you could basically run to or navigate to what this is. You can also double click it, or you can right click this. I don't know. But I can grab another one by going to content, and I can change it to, say, rock. And I can grab any one of these. These are materials. This one, however, is not. This is a static mesh, so this is an object or a prop. And so I'm going to grab something with a little bit of color to it. This sandstone, and I'm going to put it in as the material. And so there it is. And right now it looks terrible. It looks like really low res. And it looks like the size for it, the tiling is much too large maybe to avoid the tiling, sort of repeated tile effect that makes it very obvious that you just kind of threw it on there. But it at least gives me a little bit of contrast. Okay, so when I'm here, I can choose to move this object. I can also choose to rotate it. So these different options are right here, and you can toggle through them by using W, E, and R. It's Whiskey, Echo, Romeo. So this one, W, which is move, I can move it up and down, left and right, or any of these three directions. And so if I press E, that'll allow me to rotate it. So now I can rotate it. And then R, which is scale. So if I go back to details, you'll see here are the rotation as well as the location and the scale value. So when I change rotation, you'll see rotation change, maybe. I mean, I'm streaming, so I don't know how good the quality of this thing is. But I can rotate it, and you'll see this value change in the X direction, because that's labeled as red, this is labeled as red, and green will change the green value, which is the Y, and blue will change the Z or Z value, which is blue. And then I can press R, and I can go to scale. This is now going to be scale, and the other way you can think of it as R is resize, which I know R for rotate, whatever. So I can grab this, and I can drag it to resize it, and this is resizing the green value, because that's the one I clicked on, which is the Y. I can also Control Z to undo that. Or I can make it, I don't know if I can. It is changing the value here, so maybe it's changing the thickness of it. Yeah, it is. Because I was changing the Z value, but I wasn't seeing it change up above. So what was happening was this. So I'll undo that. And now it's back to 1. Okay, so there are different ways to move around. You can, oh whoops. Left click to sort of move in and out. Move around in X and Y as if you're like a player on flat ground. And you can also rotate at the same time. Right click, hold down right click and look around, and all that does is change the camera view. If you zoom in and out, that will move you in the direction that the camera is facing, as opposed to left click, which moves you like in a flat plane. If you zoom in and out and you're looking upward, you'll also move up. Then you can hold the scroll wheel and you can move yourself down, up, left, right. Those are your basic controls. So this is sort of just, I'm not trying to do like a super tutorial on this because I'm not greatly knowledgeable yet. This is all sort of stuff that I've learned from watching Unreal Sensei's video. He's got an intro to this. What was it called? Let me pull it up on YouTube real quick. Unreal Engine 4 Beginner Tutorial. Create worlds in UE4. It's a 4 hour and 20 minute video, 4 hour, 19 minute and 51 second video, but man is it good. I actually didn't even realize that I wasn't subscribed, so now I'm subscribed. Shout out to Unreal Sensei for all the help. So he covers all of this stuff as well as pretty much how you work anything in the menus, as well as importing landscape and then changing materials for it, doing an auto material for it. Like, he goes through really everything. And so I've really only been doing this for a little while, and I've tried to figure out, well, let me see if I can grab the map that I want, the one that I have as an idea for my game, and if I can put it in, and if I can size it correctly, and thus go through the rest of his video to complete that landscape, to add foliage, to add texture, to do an auto texture material that's dependent on slope and things like that. So far, let me get rid of this stuff. Actually, I can leave it for the time being. And what I want to do to be able to import a height map, actually, I'll even do that with display capture. Okay, so now from UE4, I just minimize, and you can use Terrain Party, for example. Let me get this out of the way. So I can use Terrain Party. Go to Chrome, here's Unreal Sensei's channel, and this is the video I was talking about. This right here. It's 4 hours and 20 minutes long. It is a 4 hours and 20 minutes well spent, especially if you follow along and you're doing it. And this is kind of what I'm gonna go back to. Like, now that I know I can import my landscape and I can size it correctly and stuff. And the other thing was adding an ocean. What a horrendous time I had trying to put an ocean in there. I finally got it to work. But now that I've gotten that stuff out of the way, I know that I need to material my landscape, and so I'm gonna use this for going through foliage and stuff, and I'm gonna use this texture video for the auto material, and I'm gonna be going through that to end up adding the texture to my terrain and then adding the foliage to it. But I'll do that later. I'm just kind of walking you guys through what I've already done, and I'll kind of do it now here in a minute as well. But yeah, to get a height map, and what is a height map? It's essentially, it's a grayscale image of an area in the world, or not in the world, fictional world. Real world, fictional world, doesn't matter. The lighter areas are taller or higher elevation, and the darker areas are lower elevation. So this is an island with its sort of mountainous region through here and the ocean over here. Okay, so you can use World Creator or something like that to sort of create a fictional one, and that's not what I'm doing because that's not my plan. So I went to terrain dot party, and I said, okay, well, this will grab it for me, it'll output it for me, and then I can sort of just use that and I can modify it if I need to. Okay, but the issue I ran into was this will only collect data from regions that are red. So you can't grab everything. And so what happened was I wanted to get this island in Japan, so I'll just take this over to Japan. And let's just go over to Japan. And let's actually scroll over this way some. Just because I want to see what the area looks like that you can actually grab before I go over there. I thought it was red for some reason. Oh, well, the other way to see it, of course, is by changing this from OpenStreetMap to USGS shaded. So here you can see all of this height map information, which is essentially, what does that look like? The US and Mexico, Central America, basically none of South America. I mean, you've got Colombia, maybe Peru in there, and then Greenland, and then this just little western region of Europe, or is that Africa? Yeah, that's Africa. Actually, that's Europe right there. Maybe there's a height map section here for Africa, but you can see it also grabs a little bit of España or Spain. Portugal's probably in there as well since it's right next to it. But over here in Japan, as you will see, nothing. So here it is with some color to it. You've got a little bit of this corner of Russia, Greenland along there with it, but almost none of Asia. Basically none of Africa or Europe or Asia, aside of like this little wedge in the western region. So this is the problem that I had when I wanted to grab something from Japan. Is I said, hey, I'm going to grab this island from Japan, and that's what I'm going to use for my height map. And you can change the size of this thing, and then you click this button and it downloads it for you, it exports it. So when I opened the folder for it, it had a readme. I didn't see any height map image, and it had a readme file, and so I read it, and it said, hey, sorry, there's no height map data for your selected region. And then when I, changed the camera from this OpenStreetMap to shaded, I saw, oh, they don't have it. And so what I ended up going to was, I'm gonna say it's called Tangram. Tangram Height Mapper. And so this does have basically everything. The cool thing about Terrain Party is that I believe it tiles it for you, while this does not tile it for you. You get a single image. So, let's say I went back over to Japan and I wanted to grab some island, right? I want that auto exposure to sort of show me an island. Actually, I'll use map lines to find one. So here's one. And I'll get rid of the map lines, and now I can hit export, and this will give me this exact image that it sees in the browser from border to border. That's what it's going to give me, and it's going to give it to me in the exact number of pixels, I believe, as my screen. I haven't tried this by changing my resolution to 1080 to see if it really does give me that, but I have my my screen set to 4K, and so I know that it does give me basically that. But it exports it, and then it shows it to me, and that's basically what I showed you here a second ago, was one of these. And as you can see, this is titled Tsushima. And so I get this height map, but if I import it to UE4, so let's go back to UE4, and let's say I import a height map. I go to modes, landscape, and then over here I can import. Okay, and in order to add the new water plugin, first of all, you have to enable the plugin. But the other thing is you have to enable edit layers to be able to apply it to your landscape. So if you wanted to add an ocean, a river, or something like that, that water is considered a layer, and so you have to be able to edit your layer, your terrain as a layer to add those the functions of that plugin. So if I chose import from file, enable edit layers, I could also create new by just sort of hand sculpting it, which would take a ton of work, which is why people use things like World Machine or World Creator. And so I can choose a file for it, and these are the tiles of what I actually use. But let's go to my desktop and let's just grab one of those height maps. Okay. I will tell you, this thing is huge. Right now it looks gigantic in the Z direction, and I know, because I know my actual numbers, that this should actually be scaled something like 400 or something like that. 394 or something, I think was the number that I found that works. And I want to say the Z value may or may not be okay. But let me move this around as well, just to sort of, so I don't end up starting underneath my terrain. So if I could find that gizmo, that'd be great. So I'll choose W for move, and I'll try to move it down. And I'll zoom out. You notice that the gizmo size doesn't change at all when you do that. So I can zoom out as much as I want to make a really big change to it. And that way I can move it underneath my level. And one good way to check for this is sort of move to the height of your starting location. And then seeing if it actually runs into it. And if you have if you're just dropping it in place without moving it in X or Y direction, there's usually a line, one of these vertices that runs right through this location. And if you want to find it again, you just press 1. It's your starting location. You can add more of those later. But I don't see the one that's running through it, so I'm going to look down, find my gizmo. I'm going to try to get a view of both of them together. It seems I might not have one running right through the center. It doesn't look that way, because when I look that way, if I'm at this location and I move straight up, I look in that direction, I know my camera just shut off. And I don't see a line running through here, and I don't see a line running through here. So that method is not going to work, but I can still check using the surrounding ones. Like I said, go pretty much to the height of your starting location. And see if your map is underneath or your map is above. It is still below, so I'm going to look down and I'm going to pull it up some more. And I can go to full screen by pressing F11. That might make this a little bit easier. Whoops, I grabbed onto something else. Okay, so which ones are before it and which ones are after it? I can turn, move over to my level. So I can see that these are essentially the closest ones, and that is already above my starting location, so that likely could present an issue. So I'm gonna put this at just about that height. Okay. And we'll see if that works out. I'm gonna get out of full screen by pressing F11 again. Here it is. And I'm just gonna hit import. These are sort of the, if you wanna go back to the settings that that UE4 recommends, you hit fit to data. And I just changed the scale because I knew essentially what the amount of pixels in my image were, and sized it accordingly. I said, well, this should be about 15 kilometers across, and I had however many pixels it was. And when I divided my kilometers by my pixels, this was essentially the number that I got. 100 means 100%, which means it's 1 to 1, which means it's exact. So I got almost exactly 4.0 as my number. I got 3.94. Okay, so let's just import it. It may end up okay, it may not. Okay, so it did. And so now here I am. There is some terracing going on. This is like the sort of pixelated surface. I can use the landscape. Where's this thing? Smooth to sort of do a fix some of that. But of course, this place is huge. Let me zoom out to give you an idea. Let me change my camera speed because that'll help. All right. And I think I may not have even sized it correctly. I don't think, because I had quite a few images saved, and one of them would have been 394. I think this is not that one. This one might have been closer to like 900, and it would have been even bigger than this. So here it is, and you can see it's huge. There's a problem with it being this huge. Is it essentially is rendering the whole thing because it's a single tile. And I'm not exactly sure how to get around that with a single tile, but if this were a multi-tile, if this were a tiled landscape, you can set the LODs or level of details to sort of show, to render a distance that is like 2 tiles worth surrounding you. So you'd have like your central tile and then the tiles next to it, all around it. And then if that weren't enough, then you can choose a greater render distance so that you don't have things popping in and out, but at the same time you don't have a million things loaded at the same time. But with this single place, it's huge. And so to give you a better idea of how big it is, let me rebuild lighting. Build lighting only. Control Shift semicolon. So now, as you can see, building the lighting takes a little bit longer now. That was just exporting the lighting, now it's building the lighting. It's still at 0%. Let's see how quickly it gets through it. Because before there was almost nothing there. And now there's this gigantic landscape. Still not done. Alright, now it's done. I can click this arrow. Usually play will just show up here if you if this thing isn't full like this. Mine though, my icons are too big because I use my TV as my monitor and it's pretty far away from me. So I want these to be sufficiently large for me to see. And so now I can hit play. There are different ways to do this. You can just hit play and it plays in this preview monitor. Okay, and just to give you an idea of the scale of this gigantic place. Oh, of course, the Kill Z let's go back. So in world settings, you'll have kill Z. This is the height at which it'll kill you. So if you go down, if you fall as far as 1000 Z, which is 10 meters in the Z direction, it'll kill you. So you can change this value manually. You can type it in, whatever. But there is another option, because there are also world bounds in the X and Y direction. So not only could I fall too far, I could actually move too far outward in my map and it'll kill me. The easiest way to get away with this is just, this is world bounds. Kill Z is specific to Z, but there are world bounds nevertheless. So you can just enable world bounds, and now it won't kill you. Even if you fall too far or you go too far out of the edge, doesn't matter. It won't kill you. Okay, so now I can go back to play. I had to left click on it for it to work. Let me do that again. So if I click play, I'm still not playing. I try to press stuff and nothing happens. So I left click the screen where it's going to be playing, and now it will let me. W for forward, S for backward, A for left, and D for right, like any other game, and then spacebar for jump. This is the starter mannequin, and so now I should be able to fall as far as I want without dying. Alright, so now you can probably see this place is huge. So again, with the terracing, where this is like a pixelated surface, and I could smooth it out. Another thing you can do is you can edit the image like in Photoshop or GIMP or something like that. I use GIMP because it's free. And you can add a blur to it, or like a Gaussian blur, for example. You can try any of the blurring effects that you want to see which one gives you the best results, but that'll sort of get rid of some of this. It'll just blend some of the pixels to values closer to the neighboring pixels, so that you get a smoother, more gradual value. Another thing is, if you import an image that's in 8 bits per pixel, you're going to get something that looks horrific, because it doesn't have a whole lot of information for or a whole lot of potential or possible values for dark or light, and as a result it can't have a whole lot of detail. So like the minimum height to the maximum height value is a very limited scale, where if you change it to 16-bit, it does improve that. So you can do that in Photoshop. I'm sure there are a million videos out there changing an image to 16-bit per pixel grayscale in Photoshop. And in GIMP I was having some trouble doing it, because you can select grayscale for the image, and then when you go to export it, it can still export it as an RGB. So it can still not produce it as a grayscale image. So I'll go through that here in a second. But as you can see, yeah, this place is gigantic. Anyway, so I'll go to GIMP real quick. Okay. So I'll open GIMP. Like I said, this one is free. There's a lot of cool stuff. I haven't learned it too well. I've only learned the things that I've needed to use so far, which I think is helpful, because you could learn a million things and then only use 10 of the things, and then you'll get good at those and you'll forget about everything else. So you kind of just wasted a bunch of time learning them. But let's say I drag this this image into there, this height map, and this is sort of a squished version of the same image, where this is like the north and south bounds, and then this section here was like the center section of it, which was about as wide as from here to there. And I just sort of squished it horizontally, because I know my map is way too huge. And I said, I'll do that, and then I'll sort of blend it in the areas where it needs it. And so here's the image, and I can go to Image, Precision, and so here's a bunch of stuff, right? 8-bit integer, 16-bit integer, 32-bit integer, and then 16 and 32-bit floating point. Well, and if you wanted to, say, tile this, turn it into a bunch of tiles, you could use guides and then create basically lines. Let's say new guide, and let's say I drag it from here to there, and I can do that, and that'll chop it up into so many photos, and then I could import those pieces of landscape individually and then sort of place them individually within Unreal. But that in itself is also a big hassle, okay? So that's not what I do. But I go to image, and I can change the precision. Let's even change it to like 32-bit integer, whatever. But the important thing is when I export this, okay? And this is to be able to just put it in as a landscape the same way that I just did the previous one. I export this as, and when I hit export, right, I could just put the name there, reshaped to export. It's gonna give me this option here. Now in this automatic pixel format, this drop down right here, this is what actually chooses whether it's gonna be 16-bit or 8-bit, and whether this is gonna be grayscale or RGB. So I'm gonna go to 16-bit per pixel gray. Now I'm gonna export. But where is this exporting to? Well, this will tell me. Ugh. Let's go to my OneDrive. Let's cancel this. I'll go to, desktop. Yeah, let's just go to desktop. That's fine. Oh, the save file is in my OneDrive desktop. I don't understand. Me, OneDrive, desktop. Who knows? But here are the actual files I have on my desktop, so that's fine. Export 16-bit per pixel gray. It's grayscale. Export. All right, now I don't remember if I applied a blur to this or not. I may have. I'm just kind of grabbing it as an example. Script, so I'm not using it. Okay. Here's reshaped. The new one should be over here somewhere. Let's refresh this. Here it is. Reshaped 2 is what I named it. So now I'll open UE4 again, and I'll say, you know what? I don't want this landscape. So in order to do that, you see if I left click, like all it's doing is smoothing this. I don't want it to smooth it anymore. I want to get rid of it. So I will go back to select. Let's go back to my original location by pressing 1. Let me select my landscape. You can see it's outlined now in yellow, and it outlines the border because that's where the rest of my landscape is, sort of. So now I delete it. Boom, it's gone. Awesome, right? Now I can go back to landscape, and I can import my new one. So here it's still showing me the old one. So this is one thing that's really cool if you find out that you imported it and it wasn't exactly correct, like say it was too flat or too peaky, is you can import it, okay? And then you can select it, or you can even press Control Z, I think, after importing. Control Z, there you go. And then back in landscape, you can tune this and say like, oh, well, it was too peaky, I need to bring that down some, and then import it. And then say, okay, well, that's right, but my X and Y values aren't right. So I can press Control Z, and I can go change my X and Y values as well. And that will help you better tune your image, or like say you put it too high or you put it too low. You can do that. You can import it, find out it's a little too low, locate your gizmo, and then drag it back up, and then keep doing that by pressing import and pressing Control Z, or by just deleting it and going back into landscape, and it'll still have that previous file there. Okay, but this time what I actually want to do is get rid of this one and just use my new one. So instead of that one, I'm going to use the one that I titled Reshaped 2. Boom. Sorry, got another text. So here I am once again, and now I'm importing this one. This one looks kind of flat, but I don't actually know that because these things might just be super far away. I'm just gonna import as is, and then that'll give me a better idea of what's going on with it. Alright, so like I said, I was trying to sort of squeeze the mountainous area together so that my east to west is not so huge. But it does look like my mountains are a little bit too small. And I think I did try to smooth this one, and unfortunately it didn't work out, because as you can see where my shoreline should be and my other nearly flat but not yet flat sections are pretty much flattened out. And so that's a problem. So I gotta grab my original image and I need to redo this. So it didn't work out. But as you can see, it's in 16-bit grayscale and it works just fine. And 16-bit grayscale is also important for putting your file, your height map, into a tiling program as well. So where it takes a single image and then splits it up into tiles so that you can then import it as a tiled image. Let me change my camera better. Actually, I'll just be right back. Alright, so all you have right now is UE4. And then let me put a text here. Like my episodes. Let me just open a text document instead. Notepad. What is this? Control plus? View, zoom. This is something I also recommend for any program, is like learn the hotkeys. Zoom in, control plus. So I'm gonna hold control and I'm gonna press plus. I know you guys can't really see that right now. All right. Hey, what's going on, the Midget Man? Thanks for coming. And I'm actually trying to make a game that is sort of post-war, and it's going to be mostly a game where you kind of wander around and explore the environment after this war has already passed. Shortly thereafter, rather. So, I mean, it's my first game, and so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make a really nice landscape with really good foliage, good graphics and stuff, and a character that's fitting for the place with maybe some NPCs you can interact with, some items you can pick up, and some dialogue, maybe some cutscenes. So I'm trying to go pretty basic with it because it is my first game. And I mean, I may or may not release it as a free game in Steam, depending on how I feel about it at the end. But it's kind of just a work in progress from in every aspect. That I'm not entirely certain what I'm making yet, but I kind of just wanted to get comfortable with the tools. Survival mechanics. And sorry, there's like a 10 or 15 second delay or something from when I say something to when it shows up. So it's not like I'm not trying to respond to your questions and stuff late. It's just that you're not gonna hear my response until 10 or 15 seconds. But survival mechanics, I do hope to add them in. And just to give you an idea of what I mean is that, like I said, it's supposed to be post-war, and after this war, you're exploring the island, trying to find someone that you knew who lived on the island, in hopes that of finding them still alive. And with this would come some inherent dangers. For one thing, there may be wildlife, and there may be some people from the opposing military force who have still survived and would be hiding on the island, essentially, and could potentially attack you. And I haven't decided yet whether the character will be, say, for example, a warrior themselves, capable of taking them out, or whether it would be another way of just avoiding being attacked by this assailant. But let me get right back to it. So let's get rid of this be right back. So what I was going over was some landscape stuff. I know you might have just recently jumped in, but you can scroll back, or I can do it again if you want to see how I imported. And this one is not the best example, and I mentioned it when I put it in, was that I tried to use a smoothing effect for this image, and this was some odd days ago that I tried. And as you can see, it flattened out most of my land that was near the shore. And so it didn't work out too well. But I can import the previous one, so I can Control Z this, get rid of that one, and I can import one of the other files. This one right here. and set this to 100, because I had reduced this just as an example earlier, but it was at 100 was fine. So I can import this, and I'll see sort of where it lands in relation to my starting point. And of course I can just sort of place a starting point anywhere that I want to. Actually, this might not have been the right one. Control Z. Yeah. So this is, as you probably saw the name of my height map file. It's Tsushima. So this is gonna take place essentially after the Ghost of Tsushima, which is the Mongol invasion of Japan in between the 1870s and 1880s. Was it? No, I'm wrong. This is way back in the day. Let's see. 1200s? Mongol invasion of Japan. So 1274 and 1281. And so, yeah, the idea of this is that it's you go and explore the island afterward in search of somebody that you knew. Let's try putting this in. Okay, so if I import this height map, I can change the scale of it in X and Y, depending on how it comes out. But the first thing I do is I just drop it in and I just import to see just about how big it is. And this one actually looks pretty good. Even my starting point is pretty close to the elevation for it here. But it's pretty big. It's pretty big, and the way that I can sort of figure this out, when I import this, if I find that it's like too flat or too peaky or not correctly scaled in X and Y, I can Control Z and then adjust it and then re-import. And then another way to do this is to look for my gizmo. And so where's my gizmo? There it is. So I can move it. If I press W, I can now move it up, down, left, right, and such in Z, X, or Y direction. Yeah, it's a huge map. So the other issue I was talking about was to import this as one map is a real issue because it loads the whole map all the time. So you have to tile the map and then import it as a tiled landscape, which kind of presents its own issues. But with W I can move it, with E I can rotate it, with R I can resize it, and I can also just change those values here. But this is an easy way to sort of drag it up and down to the right elevation and then sort of fine-tune it with the values here if the gizmo is a little too sensitive. And right now it's fine. And the other thing is, I don't know how familiar you are with UE4, maybe I'm telling you stuff you already know, but Enable World Comp will allow me to import tiled landscape. And then, actually let me move my, because I know my camera's on the bottom right, I just noticed as I was reviewing it. So let me disable performance review and let me grab my display capture, no, not display capture, video capture device and move it over to the left. Alright. Now I'll go back to it. Actually, let me performance mode. So here I am back in UE4 and I'll just import it as is. And if I leave the kill Z on, the kill Z right here, because normally Enable World Bounds is on, and then kill Z is usually set to, what was it, -1000 or something like that, which is only 10 meters. Then when I jump off this platform, it just kills me. So you can change this value, or you can disable World Bounds, and then that way it doesn't kill you in any direction, X, Y, Z, it doesn't kill you in any of them. So now I can jump off the platform, I can run all the way to the edge of the map, I can even jump off the map and it just won't kill me, ever. Okay, so now that I did that, I'll hit play. And I do need to rebuild lighting. Whenever you see this, you can go to build lighting only, or just click build and it'll build everything. But I'll just hit play, and I'll use I can't move until I left click on the viewport. So I left click on it. Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, let me know when you're back and I'll continue. So for anybody else out there, and I guess I'll repeat it as well when my viewer gets back, but water as a plugin, I had the hardest time trying to add an ocean. It just wouldn't show up. It just never showed water. Let me delete my landscape, and I'll work on that real quick. Select. I'll click on my landscape and I'll delete. I could have also Control Z, of course. Okay, so now that's gone, and the only thing that's left is my starting map. Just this default third-person setup. So, Ocean. First of all, it's a plugin. So if I go to Edit, Plugins, Water. I need to enable water. I might as well enable shallow water while I'm here. This is a beta, so it may be removed, and even worse, this is experimental. It's supposed to be in UE5, but this is sort of the first implementation for it is 4.26, and so far I've had a big headache with it, but it is really cool, really cool. And Unreal Engine's YouTube channel has some cool videos going over how some of the stuff works, the limitations, and then how to some sort of duct tape workarounds was the exact language used to workarounds that are practically as bad as just sort of duct taping something together, but it works. And they honestly, even those two videos didn't provide the solution for me. So let me just restart this right now. Another thing to enable perhaps is volumetrics, and unfortunately I might have to do this again. This is a library of volume creation and rendering tools using blueprints. So restart now. Okay, so here we are. Now I have my plugins. Now I can, because if I would have searched up here water and looked for the ocean, it wouldn't have been here. So if I drop this in, it might work right now. Ah, it doesn't work. Okay, perfect. And so what was said in the video was that the ocean, if you've got a landscape already, then it would import this water landscape brush or brush manager. So let me delete the water body ocean, and I'm gonna drop this water brush manager in first, and then I'm gonna drag in the water body ocean. And so now I do have an ocean, but what does it look like? Like nothing, like blue. All right, and when I was using it before, it just wouldn't show up at all. It showed the sort of the spline outline, this box, dimension box and stuff, but it never showed water, and it didn't even show this color. So what I found was, and I can't remember if it was in Water Mesh Actor, Water Brush Manager, or Water Body Ocean, but I'll find out here in a second. I click to details, and I look for effects height map. And this might be in collisions or it might be in physics. So I don't see it under physics here. I don't see it under collision. This is water mesh actor that I'm looking at. So I'm gonna go back to water brush manager. And here I see effect height map. And I'm gonna set that to false. Check that out. I don't know why, like now I can even set it to true and it works. But of course, because it's an experimental feature, it has a lot of bugs. And so another thing that you'll see is that like this square that you choose, these splines are supposed to outline your island essentially. Like if you were to place this around an island, and then you'd have to shape this to your map. And I'm sure there are some other more creative ways of getting this spline and stuff to fit your island so that you don't have to bother with that. I have not found a way to do that, but what I did find was this water will follow you, okay? And what I mean by that is if you were to walk outside of the square of this water, and let me just fly way up so you can see how large it is. It's supposed to essentially be big enough that it is your horizon pretty much, unless you're at really high elevation. But it's pretty big. But if you were to walk outside of that, say if my height map extended all the way out there, my terrain extended way out there, and I were to go past this square, it actually follows me. This square actually follows my player, and so I don't have that issue anyway. So that's really cool. Okay, so the other thing is these splines. So you see that this is sort of an exclusion area. So if you wanted to add this to a map, you already have your map in there, you add this ocean, but you're like, well, I don't want anything excluded. I can just left click this spline and then I can move it. So I can move it that direction and then this direction, or I can grab onto the corner between the two and then just move it in. And now I can do the same thing with this far spline here. I know that the blue is the Z or the Z, so I know I'm grabbing the X and the Y by grabbing the red and green. And now you can see it's all water. Unfortunately, because it's not surrounding the landscape, so to speak, it doesn't have a collision to the terrain. And because of that, you see the water just sort of appearing from the ground, from like it'll appear from out of nowhere. Right now, I know it's because like this place is really tiny, which let me just change that. Let me resize this, and I'll grab the red and green corner. And let me resize this thing. But you can see now, like where there is no water, and that's kind of not happening so much here, but there will appear some water from out of nowhere because it's sort of ignoring this terrain. And if you want these big waves, that can really be an issue, and you may have to trace your island using these splines, which will be hard if you have a giant map, of course, with like really complex shorelines and stuff. Another option though is to change the type of wave. So you're gonna go to details over here for, not for floor, right now I have floor of course, but let me select my ocean. And I look over here under my details, and then I'm gonna look for the type of waves that I have. Right here, wave. Wave attenuation is supposed to be the flattening of the waves once it's reaching terrain, but here of course I have no control over that. If my, I mean I could do it for this island because it would be easy enough, but assuming I didn't and I had a huge map, If you can fit the splines to the size of your island, then sure, just trace it. But if you can't, okay, this wave attenuation is not going to help you at all, and you need to change from water waves asset reference from, I think these are Gerstner waves. I don't know why it showed the other, but it's like displaying the Gerstner waves. But these are the Gerstner waves. But if you change that to water waves asset reference, you get much milder waves. And now you don't really have this issue. It may come about here and there if there's just like a really small space along your shoreline, but generally this is worked out for me pretty well because they're almost flat. And another thing was, even the times that water did show up, I wasn't getting this underwater post-processing effect until I disabled effects height map, which again, not affects landscape. Where is it? Water body ocean, water brush manager, effect height map. For whatever reason, I guess because of the bugs, until I disabled effect height map, it just didn't do anything. And I didn't have the underwater post-processing effect of like the blue fog. And now, even though I disable it and I re-enable it, like it makes no difference, but for whatever reason it wasn't working. So I would suggest, even if that one doesn't do it for you, just sort of change and then like say show distance and then uncheck it and see if that works for you. Because this one worked for me and there's not really any reason it should have. But now here I have some terrain, the objects within it, these little tiny staircase and platforms and stuff, and ocean. And as you can see, because there's not a whole lot of height to the waves, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. And I'm not sure actually if the wave height affects these water waves asset reference waves, but let's increase that value. Let's see, that's what that looks like. Pretty close to the top edge of my platform. Let's set this to 0. No. Sorry, this is wave height attenuation. So, max wave height offset. Let's make this huge. Nothing. 0. Let's set it to a negative value. Wow. So that got rid of them. Let's go back to 0 and see how that's affecting it. Alright, so at negative 590 I got them to come back. Negative 660 or so. Negative 674, negative 680 or something like that was what got it to break. But I'm not sure exactly what it's doing. But now it's popping in and popping out, which I don't want. I'll just set this back to 0, and now I don't have that issue. Okay, so in my streams, like I said, what I'm gonna be doing is, these are the things I've learned so far: how to get a height map, how to import it, how to I haven't shown you how to tile it, but I will show you that here in just a second. How to get the ocean to work, and then sort of the basic mechanics of moving and shaping and resizing and rotating objects, as well as how to drag stuff in from the place actors here. And then this is your content browser, which I showed earlier how to find a material, and you can drag and drop it into your material once you're looking at details for that specific object. But the other thing is tiling a landscape. So there's a let me find this guy's YouTube video first of all. Let me see, what am I showing here? Instead of display capture, I'll put UE4 back up there, just so I find it. Alright, so I've got it now. Let me put the display capture above UE4 now. Okay, so here I'm at UE4. Let me go back to YouTube. So, this video right here. This is from a YouTuber named Gordon Vart. And you can download his Open Height Map tool. You put it out for free, you can download it, you can use it, and it works. And this is going to turn your single tile landscape into a tiled landscape of multiple tiles of your choosing, essentially. And so let me open that up. I think I want to say I have it in my downloads. Open Height Map Tool version 1.1. When you download it and you unzip it, that's essentially what you're going to be seeing. And so here's the Open Height Map Tool application. In case you're confused about which one it is. It's not any of the DLL files, the executable config, or the PDB. It's going to be this application file, which you'd see under types. And in the event that you don't see that in your computer, you right click up here where you've got these different categories, and you can select type. And in the event that you don't have that either, like if this view is set to icons, say large icons for example, I can set the view to details, and now I can choose what those are by right clicking up here and then choosing what I want to be able to sort by, or what information I want it to display. So now it's displaying type, and now I know, oh, this is the application file. I can open the application. What I'm going to do is click file name, and over here in this box, it allows me to select an image. The only caveat to this is that this needs to be a 16-bit per pixel grayscale map. So I showed you how to do that in GIMP just a minute ago. You just basically drag and drop a file into it, a picture, and then when you export it, and when you choose export, you're gonna select, let me just do it again so you guys can see exactly how it works in case you don't want to scroll that far back in such a long stream. So I'm gonna minimize everything, and I open GIMP. Actually, I have GIMP open, but let me close it. This card changes. Okay, GIMP. I'm gonna double click. It's gonna open, and you can download this for free. Just Google GIMP and it'll be there. Okay, now I'm gonna drag and drop a file into it. You can minimize it and then go look for your file and then drag it and hover over GIMP. Then it'll open up. You can drop it right in, And now here is the height map that I'll be using to save. And when I go to, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the precision, and I'll change it to 32-bit integer. You can set it to 16, but you're exporting at 16 anyway. And instead of sRGB, I'm just going to click light because I just need it to be light anyway. But that stuff is not really so important. The important part is that when you export as, and you name it, I'll name it same thing with the 2 at the end of it. And when I go to export, first of all, if you want to know where this is exporting to, click over here in your folders, select where you want it to be. Okay. And when I click export, this new window will show up right here. Export image as PNG. That's what I want. I want it to be a PNG. And if that's not already set, you just type in here at the end of the name, you type .png, and that's what it'll export as a PNG. So you click export, and now under automatic pixel format, this drop down right here, I'm gonna select 16-bit per pixel or per channel. 16-bit per channel, gray. Okay, there's 16 BPC, gray. Export. Okay. There is actually one more caveat to this program right here, is that it exports tiles only in square format. So now I'm going to grab this image that I just exported as 16-bit per channel, which it says it's supposed to be 16-bit per pixel. It works. Here it is, Tsushima Height Map 2. And I open it, but see, like I said, the other caveat is it exports in a square. So realistically, if I wanted this to export the whole thing, I would have to get a square image, or just make this into a square where it's just got black borders on the sides or something like that, and then cut that out afterwards when I go to import, or just not select those tiles. So here is where I change vertices per tile. Okay, and it says here vertices per tile. The number of vertices per tile must be a power of 2. That's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, and so on. So the lower I change this value to, okay, if I change this from 156 to 128, right now I've got 9 tiles from here to here. It makes them smaller, and there are now more of them. So what I had before, when it was set to 256, I had a 3x3, 9 tiles. When I set this to 128, I typed in 128, I hit enter. Now I have a 6x6, or 36 tiles. But you see it doesn't reach all the way to the edge here. And sometimes, depending on what you change this to, the squares, it's because there's not enough here for there to be another square. And again, really just making a big square picture with this fitting within it would fix that. The other thing is, if I just wanted to grab up to this edge and I really don't care about this stuff down here, sometimes changing this value, let's say I change it to 64, now it gets a little bit closer, because that square was not enough. It wasn't enough to fit a whole big square to fit 2 of these smaller squares to the edge, but it is enough to fit 1 more. And if I change this from 64 to 32, almost. Let's see if I change it to 16. Nope, still won't reach that edge. In some cases, like I said, it does extend it a little bit further just by making the tile smaller, because it can fit an extra tile, but for some reason there seems to be a limitation here. But let's set this back to 64, and this is how many tiles it's going to put out, which you need to think about how appropriate that is for your map. So when you go to import a tiled landscape in UE4, here we are back in UE4, and if I'm importing a landscape and I split it up into tiles that are only this big, that may or may not be a problem. The issue that I've had with making too small of tiles is that they pop in and out, but you can change that using render distance. And the thing is, if they're pretty small, you might actually get a finer draw distance where it's rendering in the surrounding tiles, and they're not like big blocks like what you see here. how you can see these corners. Where if this were split into a lot smaller, this might be closer to a circle. Which is kind of what you want. Another thing you can do is, of course, you can add fog, which I think you need to enable volumetrics for, which I did earlier, but in case you didn't see that, you go to Edit, Plugins, you type in volumetrics. And I only say that because I only think it is because it's volumetric fog. So I haven't checked actually, but let's type in fog. Atmospheric fog and exponential fog, height fog. So let's say I drop in this atmospheric fog. So as you can see, it sort of just softens the outer edge, and I can change the values for it. Right now fog is selected, but if I didn't see that, I can go to World Outliner and find it. And I can even type in right here, fog. Whoops, not GOG, fog. So now I see atmospheric fog. And it looks like I may have already had one in here. Let me stretch this out and see if there's a difference between the two. Nope. It just named my second one Atmospheric Fog 2. So I'm going to delete Atmospheric Fog 2 and I'm going to work with Atmospheric Fog 1. But if you didn't have fog in there already, you could just drop it in. So here are the different atmosphere parameters you can change. And this location may or may not be important because you can change the origin under world settings. You can have it dynamic under, where is it? World. Enable world origin rebasing. So world origin will shift to a camera position when camera goes far away from current origin. So the camera in the case while you're playing the game is of course either your character's eyes, if it's first person, or the camera that follows your character in third person. So you can enable this, enable world origin rebasing, and what that does is if you have something that sits around the center, like the ocean does it automatically, which is cool, but if something didn't, and I don't know if fog does this or not, but if fog didn't and it only surrounded the area that you chose, its location, then you could select that, and then as your character moves, the origin moves, and thus the fog would also move with your character. And so this type of fog, let's see what kind of stuff it does. World physics, no. Details of the atmospheric fog. Density multiplier. So at the lowest value it looks very white, at the highest value it looks very dark for whatever reason that is. Maybe it's a color or a texture value that's causing that. Default light color. Atmosphere affects sun illumines. That didn't look like it changed anything, but that may only be because of the values that are set here. So here's the ground offset, and so I can actually look for the gizmo of this atmospheric fog. And I can select W, and I can try to pull it up and see if that changes anything. Doesn't seem to. So I'll Control Z that. And like I said, that might be because this is atmospheric fog, where this is exponential height fog. So it's going to be height dependent. Density multiplier, density offset, distance scale. If I change this distance scale, let's see what happens. Whole lot of nothing so far. Default value is 1. Density multiplier, that was the one I had changed earlier. Sun multiplier. I guess that's like the the bloom or like light scattering that's occurring as the light passes through this volume. But of course, this is stuff you can just mess with on your own and kind of see what it does. Okay, now that atmospheric fog still exists, and I'll kind of leave it in there, and I'll just uncheck it so that it's not visible. Okay, and that way I'm not deleting it, and I can still leave it in there as part of my default. But I'm gonna introduce this exponential height fog. Okay, now this one does change with height. So if you have a really mountainous range, something with a lot of change in elevation, you can set this so that it only affects essentially the lower areas, say like the shoreline, if you were doing a beach scene like I am. Where this would only affect the beach and not really be in effect of the mountains, which you could also introduce clouds. Volumetric cloud. And so you can set the height position of that to be for the mountains. So you can have a separate fog for the lower elevation and then set also a cloud for the higher elevation, or just leave it without a cloud. In any case, we were in fog. And so with this fog, I go to details for my fog. And if it's something you can just left click on, you don't have to look for it up here, but if it's something you can't, for example, you're trying to click on fog, but it just keeps grabbing the ocean, or keeps grabbing the sky, or keeps grabbing the clouds, something like that, then, you know, just find it in here. You can type it up here again to find it. Here's exponential height fog. Okay. Fog density. So I could change that to be pretty dense or be essentially non-existent. So if I know that my rendering distance is pretty poor and I just don't have a fix for it, or maybe not one that I'm happy with, I can increase my fog value. Fog height fall off. While not changing the height location for it, it does seem to change the height at which you see fog. And so this is fall off, like what this refers to is how drastically it goes from fog to no fog. And so I assume that well, I shouldn't make any assumption about whether, see, high density factor controls how the density increases as height decreases. Smaller values make the visible transition larger. So if I set this to 0, it would go from essentially no fog to like a ton of fog, theoretically, with a really harsh change, which may be something you want. Realistically, if you want to reshape this and it only fits inside of a room that, say, has smoke or something in it, then that could, or if it was if it were a steam room or something like that, then you could do that. So you could change that by essentially changing this all the way down to 0, so it's really harsh, and then sort of resizing it to the shape of the room. Otherwise, you can make it be really gradual by increasing this value greatly, and then that way, as you're moving upward in elevation, you wouldn't see as drastic of a change, where you might want it to be that way, where like you're in a super dense heavy fog, and then as soon as you get up past a certain point, you'd want it to be a really quick exit from the fog. And I know you can't see it a ton because I don't have like a background going on right now, but you can see that like the clouds are washed out right now, and then as soon as I move above pretty much this point, I have no more fog. Although if I set it to too low a value, too close to 0, it seems like it kind of ends up infinite. So let me put it to 0.003. Nope. 0.1. Okay. It did seem to change it. So you can see as I drop in, how much the fog is diminishing the view I have of my clouds and the sky just below it. So you can see that transition right here. Let me change to full screen so you can get a better view of that. No fog. If you look up here in my cloud section, fog. No fog, fog. F11 to get back out of there, and I'm going to delete this fog now. Alright, so here's my scene, back to normal. Alright, so if I grabbed an image, a square image, if I wanted this, like I said, I'd have to have a square image that includes this. That way I can tile it so that these squares sort of grab it. And the other thing is, it would have to be at the left end because this grabs it at the left edge. So here's an example of that. Here's a square image, and I actually grabbed that from, I think I had changed it from another image, so where is this? This one right here. Okay. So you can see that I spaced it all the way to the left, and I tried to get it to be at least the entire width that I needed, with enough black surrounding it that I could crop out a square from it. So all I did was go to edit, and then I went to edit with photos, and I can do that now, and then I can leave this as square because I know that's what I need. And now I have my square region. And so I can essentially grab this, save a copy, which I've already done. It's the one that's on my desktop. So I can do that, and then once I've done that, I can open up the tool once again. Where is it? Open height map tool. Here it is. I click on file name, and then I go find my square image. So let's say it's this one. And I've got my square section here, and if it's not enough, I can sort of cut off more of this left side, or I can increase the vertical size by just adding some black to it, just sort of resizing it. You can resize it in GIMP. The way you would resize it in GIMP is you would do right click, image or layer image, transform, scale image, and here you can change it to a square dimension that's larger than your actual image. So let's say I change this to 2000 by 2000, or yeah, I can disconnect this. It's trying to keep the aspect ratio. I think what this is actually going to do is change the size of my image though. Let's see. Scale. It says that I'm trying to scale an image that's going to require memory usage of 165 megabytes, which is greater than the standard 134.2 that's set in the preferences. So let's not do 2000 by 2000. Let's do 1500 by 1500. Scale. So it did reshape it, and unfortunately that's not the result that I wanted. But I can also remove this layer, just sort of make a black background. You can do this in Paint as well. Just make a black background, you know, use the bucket, drop in Paint, and then drop your photo right into it. And then that way you can export that, or you can even use Snipping Tool, for example. Here's Snipping Tool. So let me show you how to do that with snipping tool as well. Discard changes. So let's say I have that image. Here's my image. Resize. I can change it to 2 megapixels. This is for like YouTube. But what I can do here is if I wanted to grab a square image, say like in the other example where it was a little too tall or whatever, I can use snipping tool. And then using snipping tool, I can grab a section even larger than it. Whatever I want it to be. And then I can save that. Then I can put that in GIMP and change it to grayscale, 16-bit, and then import it into the height map tool. And then I know it would work. Or I could crop out the left side again and then, you know, just get it to fit where I need it to be. Where these tiles are going to grab everything that I needed. So let's just grab this one for now. I wonder what the rate that my camera is dying at versus my camera charging is. I guess I'll find out. If this one's dead and my new battery is not fully charged, my other battery that I just swapped out is not charged yet, then I know that with given enough time, I would be without a battery. When it died, I wouldn't have a fresh one to put in, or at least a fully charged one to put in. Okay, so here it is and this will tell you on the bottom. Oh, actually, it even says it. Look, warning: the image provided is not 16 bits per pixel. 16 bit per pixel grayscale image needed. Okay, and that was Tsushima HM new.png. So this one here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open GIMP again. And I'm gonna drop Tsushima HM into it. Here it is. I drop it in. File. Export as. I'll name it with 2 at the end. Export. And I will select 16-bit per channel, not RGB. Whoops. Gray. Export. Okay, that's done. I can close GIMP. Here it is. No, that's not it. Let's refresh this. Here it is. Okay, so now that I've got it in the correct format, I can go back to the tool. File name, it's under image, by the way. If you don't see it, it's under, you click the drop down for image. File name. And now on my desktop it should be there. Open. Now it does not give me this warning. And now I should be able to export this. Okay. Vertices per tile. So like I said, this map is pretty big, and so I'm sort of splitting it up the way that I want it to be with this many tiles. I really don't want it to be a million tiles because it's having say loading one gigantic map, right? It takes a whole ton of memory, and that has its. So I imagine there's going to be a sort of efficiency fall off where if you make too many of them, it's having to load too many individual pieces, even though it's not having to load extra sections that it doesn't want to. Whereas if you were loading one giant one, it's not a lot of pieces, but it is a whole lot of terrain. And so I'm sure there's a balancing point in between the two, so you should probably try various values for this and see which one uses the least amount of memory. and which also yields good results for rendering distance. And so this looks fine to me. I don't think it's excessive. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 49 tiles in total. Let me actually change that to 512. Look at that. Because these tiles are too big to make another tile over here, this won't work. So I'm stuck with 256, or once again adjusting my image so that I can do it. So I'll leave it like this. File, no. Export tiles is on the top right hand. I think it would be useful to also have it within file, since that's where a lot of programs have it, and this is like way off in the corner by itself. But once again, that's from Gordon Vart. He's got a YouTube video on how to use it, how to add creators using it, because that's what he developed it for initially, was to make tiles and add creators. And there's the download for it. Okay, so here it is. And here are the creators, this functionality. His video is short enough and concise enough that if you want to find out how that stuff works, you can go watch his short video. But I'm going to export tiles now. Access to path, and it says it's under desktop tiles, yada yada. So it leaves a folder of wherever your original image was. So now here's tiles, and here here's nothing. Why? Access to path to this path is denied. Ah, okay. So if this would allow me to, I'm actually gonna move, because it doesn't allow me to choose an export location. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna delete this tiles folder, and I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna put it somewhere else. So copy, place it in, not open height map tool, but let's say in downloads. I'll make another folder, new folder, new tiles. Okay, so I'm gonna paste that picture in here. Here it is. I'm gonna open up that tool once again. There it is. I'm gonna import that new image by going to file name and then selecting it. Now I know I put it in my downloads and in new tiles. Okay, now I'm gonna export tiles. Finished. No longer gives me that error. So there it is. And now if I go here to that folder, new tiles, there are my tiles. Boom. Alright, so now let's go back into UE4. And now I'm going to import these tiles. Should I delete the ocean right now, or should I just make it invisible? I'll just make it invisible. Water body ocean, click the eyeball next to it. That didn't change anything. Okay. It's probably water mesh actor. Yep. So, change the visibility of it like this. Just so it's not distracting and it doesn't block my view of the terrain if it pops up at a low height, which is very common when you grab height maps and you import them. A lot of times they end up lower than where your default starts. Okay, so now that I've enabled world composition in world settings, enable world composition, I'm going to go to my levels tab. When I click levels, I can click import tiled landscape. Select height map tiles. I go find that folder that I just made, new tiles. Here are my tiles. Okay. Control A, enter, or you can click one or like drag like this with left click and all the way down to the bottom, or you can select the first one, hold shift and select the last one, or if you don't have a million tiles like I do, you can click the first one, then hold control and then individually click the ones you want. This is also helpful for excluding the ones that you don't want. Okay, so I'm gonna left click to uncheck and then Control A to select all. They're all here now. And then I'm gonna click open. I'm not gonna flip the tile Y coordinate. The reason you would need to do this is depending on the program, whether it's like TerraGen or World Creator or whatever it happens to be, it might actually have a different naming system for the Y values. So like where it says that the starting Y value is actually the south end or something like that, and then Unreal thinks it's the north end for X0. That, and I can't remember if it's that way or if it's vice versa, but if your north and south end up flipped, then you can just change this. And what you would actually get is like a weird image reflected about the Y, the X axis. So your left and right would still be correct, but your top and bottom wouldn't. So it wouldn't be as simple as just moving it up. It would actually be mirrored. So another thing, in order for the ocean to work, enable edit layers. We must check that. Here's where you can set how many tile coordinates you want to offset it by. So if you know it's going to drop into the top, bottom right, you can set it up into the left, however many tiles it's going to be. So if I were to go back to my image and I say like, oh, I want my character to start right, where would be a good place? Here or something like that. Then I can move it over by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles in X direction, and where did I choose? Right here? 4 tiles in the Y direction. And you're gonna have to check, because I haven't done it, to move it, whether it's positive X or negative X, to move it in the direction that you want. But I know that I should probably scale this, and I want to say for this one it is specifically 900. And my Z, last time I checked, if I remember correctly, 100 was not enough, but it was pretty close, so I'm going to set it to 150. A material I'm not going to choose yet, because I haven't made like an auto material for this, and I don't want to just put grass or something. I'm going to follow Unreal Sensei's where is it? Follow this guy's video for making an auto material to texture the landscape. So I'm going to follow his video and go about that, and then I'll do another video sort of quickly running through it. I say quickly, but how long is this video so far? Too long, I think. Let's see actually. Two hours and 22 minutes or something like that so far, which is already incredibly long. Yeah, but I'll go over that. But let me just import this now and see where it ends up. And I can tell you it's not going to end up where I want. They are nowhere, right? They're nowhere. It's because I haven't loaded them. So I click the first one, I go to the last one, I hold shift, and then I left click again on that last one, holding shift, right click, and I'm gonna click load. Now it is gonna load them, but where are they? Way over there. That's not where I want them. And if this ever happens where you put your cursor to it after moving around with the scroll wheel click, just click it again, because it'll get stuck like that for some reason when you move it really far sometimes, like that. And then when I try to right click to look around, it's still doing the same function as the clicking in the scroll wheel, and the same thing with left click does work but right click doesn't, so I just click my scroll wheel and then it seems to work. Okay, so it's way over there. What I could do is I can set a player start position over there, wherever it is that I want, or I can go into Summons World Composition. Right here, under Levels tab, here's the Levels drop down where I added the tiles, here's Level Details, here's World Composition. If I click World Composition, it'll actually show me my tiles. That's where my camera is, there's my origin, and I can actually grab all of these and then I can drag them. And another thing is I can zoom in to try to look for the place. For some reason, this doesn't look the way it's supposed to look right now. I don't know if you can tell, but there's still texture here that it's not really showing. And that is, I think, because of the sky dome and the clouds that are in the way. But I can look at where that position is if I reopen that height map tool when I look at that image again. Of course, I could have taken an image of what that was displaying. But I can try to just move it, see if it's where I want it to be, and then I can move it again. So let's say it's here. And I can look down and I can see, yeah, that's pretty good. I look straight down and I see, okay, my player's gonna be basically right above it. That looks pretty good. And if this world composition being on the side annoys you, you can drag it out, put it somewhere else, or as its own window. I like it to pop up on the right hand side. That way I know, like, I don't have to move it out of the way to adjust and see what it's doing. I just leave it over here. Okay. Now it's there. Now I can close world composition. If I need it again, I can find it again right there. So here I am. And let's go down there and see how it looks. Unfortunately, it did not allow me, when I import landscape using landscape tool, when I went to landscape and I imported it, it allowed me to choose the location of it in X, Y, and Z. And so I was able to drag my landscape up or drag it down, but I can't do that here. And so what I'm gonna do is actually create a start location down there. So let's say I want to start right here or something. So I can player start. Okay, my camera is still over here. When I press 1, it still goes to that one. And I've also got a player start over here as well. Seems this might have moved as well. That's fine. Actually, I can open world comp and see. Oh, I can't see it because the sky dome or something is in the way right now. Which I can sky sphere. It's not the sky sphere. This is a good example of when you might want to drag it out. And this is not the same thing as world bounds, this is level bounds, that's just the edge of the level. So let's see, what else have I got here that could be in the way? Third person example map, it's not going to be that stuff. Atmospheric fog, I doubt it, but, and actually I had even disabled it, so that's definitely not it. Sphere reflection capture is not going to be it. Hang on a sec. Okay, so let's see what else could be in the way. Sky sphere blueprint. Water body ocean. Water brush management. Neither of the water stuff. Okay, so my camera's dead. Let me go see if my battery is charged yet. If it is, I'll just swap it out. It's not. I wonder how long it'll take to recharge. And I've got another battery, but I don't know where it is at the moment. Because normally I keep 2 charging for a live stream, that way I can swap them out as soon as they die. And then I'll have a full one in time. But I don't know exactly why this view is not the way it should be. You can kind of see a little bit of the texture right there, but it's mostly washed out, and what you can see is all this stuff. I imagine it's a fog or a cloud or something like that. But the fog I had already disabled and I couldn't see it. So let's see, all the water is off right now. Sky sphere I had already disabled and it changes this, but it's not fixing my map. Light mass importance volume? No. Post-process volume? No. Skylight? No. Light source? Nope. Landscape? Nope. I don't seem to be able to find it, but again, like I said, you can add a player start. Come on. So you can add a player start location like I just did right over there. And I don't actually know if that's where I need it to be. My post-process volume. Let's go back to my world outliner, find my post-process volume. I can look for it. Because I know all my water stuff is off, but the post-process from the underwater is, I think, considered its own object. And it moves along with the water, but I haven't moved the water yet. See if that's what it was. No, it is not post-process volume. I can also just move the ocean at the moment. I can re-enable the visibility for the ocean and I can move it. Okay, and if I choose the ocean and I try to move it right now, I believe it won't move. Oh, it did move. Because there are some cases where that will not be the case. Sometimes that doesn't work. And this gives you a better idea of if you've got it near your shoreline or your shoreline is at least within view of it, that you can see how much of it is being, how high the water is coming up. And if it's too sensitive, you can once again move it a little bit closer to it. And the way I like to move into it is actually just hold down the right. And as you get closer to it, those changes become a little less sensitive. And you can also change that value over here in details after you've selected your water body ocean, and then this value here. That's not, wait, that is working. It just wasn't showing it in real time for some reason. So I'll drag it back down. This moves it in real time and I can see it, and then I can try to adjust that a little bit over there if it's not exactly where I want it. Let me move back over there. So that is a little too high for me. I'll move it down just a little bit. You can see it thinning out. That's too low. And the one reason that this happened is that I chose, when I went to Tangram, chose not to grab the ocean data. If I would have grabbed the height map from the ocean as well, then I wouldn't have this issue, because these would also be, instead of being flat, this would have also had its own height map. Its own height map values, and so you would have had varying values there. But as long as it's tracing the outline that I want it to trace, I can just sculpt that stuff manually. Let's hit play and see what the water's like down there. Which way was it? Yeah, it's gonna be huge. Am I nearing the edge yet? I guess I can just remove this platform for now, and then I can right click my new start location and I can click start here. Yeah, I should just do that. Let's see. Start. Player start location. Play from here. That didn't work. Let me delete this network player start, which is the original. This will break references, reference list, gameplay, debugger, category, replicator. Yes. Now if I hit play, hopefully it plays from that. No, it doesn't. So let's not delete that thing. I don't think I can network player start. There it is. Player start. I thought that was how it worked. I thought I had figured that out. It looks like I have some more work to do. Well, this is a player start, but for some reason I couldn't get it to work. Let's see what it says. This class indicates a location where a player can spawn when the game begins. Oh no, I just have two over there. Let's see what it says under details for it. Actor hidden in game, I would want that, because I don't want it to show up when I'm playing in game, but I don't think it does by default, even if this is not selected. But in the event that you had something that does show up in the game while you're playing and you don't want it to be there, you select actor hidden in game. Try to adjust location, don't spawn. Actor will try to find a nearby non-colliding location based on shaped components, but will not spawn unless one is found. Always spawn, ignore collisions. Let's see if that works. And if not, we can reset that. I'm gonna delete this thing right here. the network player start. And since that didn't fix it, I'll just return it. And I'll hit play now. Alright, so I deleted where the character was placed, and that seemed to fix it. And I deleted the other player start as well. So now here I am. Let me change to full screen. And I have to left click again to start moving around. And you can see this is running about 100 watts, including my GPU, the GPU usage for any other tasks that I've got going on in the background. But if this is running at the same frame rate as the editor, then this should be 4K 120. Here's my water, and if I change my camera angle so that I'm underneath it, no, I can't. It's too low. Maybe I can if I go out towards the edge. Should have changed the run speed for this guy before I started doing this stuff. But yeah, as you can see, these ocean floor height values are too high, which is why I have this very weak ocean depth, which I would have to change. But one other thing I want to show you is when I start, you see there's an edge there where there's no water, essentially. I'm gonna go up to this peak here, because if this ocean were not following me, okay, I would go up here and I would see no ocean in that direction, in the east direction. And similarly, if I were to head north in this direction, I would not see any ocean over here. But that should not be the case. So I'm gonna walk in this direction, up this little hill, and I should be able to see some ocean towards this eastern edge of the map. Let's see what happens. And play from here doesn't actually start you there. Let's see, where is east? If I can figure that out. Yes, there's the ocean. Oh no, I can see an edge. Why is that? That's really strange. I've not had that issue before. Alright, let's go back to editor and try to figure this out. World settings. The only thing I've changed is enable world origin rebasing. Yeah, still going on. For the water, let's go back to world outliner, delete this. Water body ocean, details. Thanks, it's very useful. Can affect navigation. Let's go to this water material. And this was the thing that I was talking about earlier that I didn't expect it to be able to move up and down, was this. Enable water VS mapping. And I think in default this is actually enabled, but for whatever reason sometimes it'll not show it the correct value that it currently is. So it could have been enabled but showing disabled, and what was said in the video from Unreal Engine was that in order to move your ocean you have to disable this. Look at this craziness. What is even going on here? Thanks a lot. Water underscore material. Okay, so now I've disabled this. And I will close. If I close up here, I think it's going to close. It may or may not close the whole program. Let's try it. Let's see. It's good. So let's start right over here where there's water. Okay, and I'm gonna walk up in this direction. Let's see if that fixes it. And maybe I need to build, actually. Sometimes stuff will be broken in the level and it doesn't show up, or like it doesn't render, and it's because it's not built. Like you've changed that stuff but it hasn't built it so that it can operate correctly. Nope, I still see an edge. Yep, still no water over here. Let me build, see if that changes anything. So I know you can't see my camera, but you can see what's going on here. It says this brush requires a landscape. Add one to the map or remove the brush actor. I've not figured out. Sometimes I've had it sometimes do this and sometimes not. And I want to say that in the cases where it has done it, it's because I added the water and then added the landscape, as opposed to adding the water afterward. So right now I'm gonna see if this works, this build, and if it does not work, I'm gonna delete my water stuff and then I'm gonna drop it in again on top of my map. Look at that, still not there. Okay, I'm gonna delete my water. That means I'm gonna delete water body ocean, water brush manager, and water mesh actor. Delete all three of them. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to water, up here in the place actors, water brush manager. I don't want to place it there. I want to place it close to where I chose my new starting location. Over here. So, water brush manager, water body ocean. There's the ocean, and look at this monstrosity. There's no color to it. Once again, I'm going to look at my water brush manager and I'm going to go down here. And I'm going to see under, what was it? Not debug, not settings. Or was it water body ocean? Not effects landscape. Effects. Height map. Where was that? Water mesh actor. Where was this thing? So not water mesh actor. Is there something else in here? No, it's just the three. Effects landscape, that's fine. Generate collisions, that's fine. Waves are okay. Where is this thing? Back to water brush manager. Effect height map. Once again, it's in water brush manager. Under settings, effect height map. I can click on the spline once again, and then I can move it to collapse this. Okay, now let's see if it works. Oh, it's the Gerstner waves again, so they're going to be popping in and out of sections that are too close to the sea level. Which, if I've got a pretty big slope, is not really an issue anyway. But let's see if I still have that same issue as before. Ah, now it's working. As you can see, there shouldn't have been any water over here, but as I get closer to the water, it ends up extending. And so if I am going to be at a really high elevation level, I think I can choose the distance, what was it? Relevant for level bounds. I wonder if that'll change anything. No, it did not. I want to say it was under far distance for one of these others. Brush material, maybe? Nope. Far distance. And then I can choose maybe another texture that'll autofill over there that's not as intense as this one. Let's see if I can do that. We'll go over here and we'll select water. Ocean water, perhaps, is maybe a good one. Far distance mesh extent. Let's turn that up. I'll turn that way up and see what happens. Oh look, there we go. Now it autofills the edge. Now I know if I'm standing up here, it'll at least fill that far section with this. And I can actually maybe choose the extent of this, but realistically I'm going to be down here, just above the terrain. And now I've essentially got waves all the way up to that point, and then beyond that I don't, but I've got this. And I can actually even apply waves to this. And it does have some waves, but they're not large enough, and perhaps I can change this in the material itself. So large scale tiling modulation 0.5. Here are the details for it as well, and some of these are changeable values. There's also parameters right next to it. Parameter defaults, noise, water base, water, okay. So I'm sure there's a good video out there for adding height to these waves, normal texture, fade out small waves for distance. And so since it has this, it leads me to believe that there is going to be a setting under details where I can change so that it's not using this, it's using the normal map. Because even though this is a little bit heavier, using a normal map for creating texture, surface like fake or simulated depth to it for the waves, it'll still be maybe less taxing than using the ocean. Sign controls, panning normal textures, create large waves. Base color mask texture, fade out color, far away from camera. Okay, so it's using this if it's close, I'm guessing, and it's using a pixel depth value depending on distance. So I'm sure there will be a good tutorial on how to use this to change the size of these waves, and so I'll be getting into that, figure that out, and that way at a distance I don't have that flatness that I have now, where it'll still have some waves, just not as intense as maybe this. And actually it won't look so bad if I change this to having, because the Gerstner waves are pretty heavy, and I didn't want them to be popping up from the ground either. So I can change my waves from Gerstner, which it was displaying even though it wasn't set to it, to water waves asset. And now it looks a little bit more normal. Where you can see they fade off in the distance. And of course I plan to really sculpt this terrain well and really add foliage to it and texture it and everything. um, uh, to do that auto material from Unreal Sensei, and maybe have more of the focus over here as opposed to having it outward at the ocean. And look, I can't click on this because it's just giving me a view of that secondary material, but it's not actually there. It's actually still within the water. And that was under water brush, I believe. Or no, I think it's under water mesh. Where was it? Under LOD. Here it is, far distance. Mesh, far distance, here it is. And so if I wanted to extend even beyond that, there. And I've got what looks like, almost like an infinite horizon. And of course, like I said, I can add fog to this and that'll sort of make up for the fact that it's not infinite, where you can kind of see that it's a little bit flat and it goes all the way out to this corner and comes back in. I can fix that by just adding some fog.